Okay, I've just started recording. This is the latest meeting for the KUDO community. Also includes Cuddle. I guess I'll be the host today. It could be anybody. I don't. It's kind of random, but I'll host it. I'll be posting up the video around it. We did not have an agenda set up, but we definitely want to talk about a number of things, including releases. Leave it open for community Q&A. But as a reminder, it is being recorded, and we do want to follow the code of conduct associated with the CNCF, as well as our own established and published community code of conduct. So with that said, the one thing that we just talked about that would be worth talking about is releases. I am, after this meeting, going to get out on RC2 for 0.14. It's the latest release of KUDO. There was an RC1 that went out earlier this week. There was some issues with the init that were discovered, among other things. Those have been merged, and I personally tested them. I feel like they look great. The tests are there, so we've had at least a couple engineers looking at it. I think it was reviewed by at least 3 or 4 of us as well. So a lot of confidence around that. And I'm not sure, do people want to talk about when we get the actual full release out? Because I think we wanted to target tomorrow, but that might be too soon. Zane, do you have it's open to anybody, but I think Zane might have an opinion on that.
No, I think it's fine. Yeah, like we can test it today, and we can go ahead with the release. I would just like to have like some operator tests to be run on that, like anybody else want, but I would like to run standard tests for the release RC2. Yeah.
You feel the same, Jan? I shouldn't leave people out.
I'm fine with what Zane just said. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Great. I will rush. I shouldn't say rush it. There's really nothing more to do than tag and push a release button. So, but I will have that happen as soon as we're done with this meeting to accelerate that ability to get involved. I know it's getting late in Europe. So, we also had a Cuddle release yesterday, the day before, recently, within the last couple of days. I think there's some pretty neat additions that are landing inside of Cuddle. The latest that I remember doing was the references for manifests generally are file-based, and they are relative to wherever you're referring to them. And now it's possible to use URLs as well. I've been combing through a lot of use cases of people using Cuddle, and that was a common one for people to use a command to do an apply on a URL. And I was like, well, why don't we just add that in? So would love to understand or see people's feedback on that, if that's a preferred thing or not. I know it does intermix a couple of ideas into the same kind of concept. There's a little bit of awareness. The docs are also lagging a little bit, so I would expect next week to be kind of a doc fest for new features. I've also included the latest Cuddle release into the latest KUDO release, so RC2 includes the dependency of the latest Cuddle. All right.
Yeah, thanks for the update.
Now it's open discussion.
Yeah.
It's probably worth saying there's a number of KEPs that have been outstanding, meaning on the horizon, and they haven't happened. So that would include, I think Jared was working on, it's the repository one. What was it? Does anybody remember?
No, there's so many.
OCI. OCI.
Yeah,
his was around OCI. I have 2 that I've promised on clustered scope, and
yeah, I just started together with Alexei. Well, it's Alexei's initiative, and I just started to work on that as well around dependencies, so that when you install an operator, it can, in the operator definition, describe what other operator it depends on, and they get installed as well as part of that.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, looking forward to that. Actually, I think dependencies and upgrades have been kind of in the works for some time. We should probably, it's great to see them finally landing.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, good to see these features coming in.
We have, I might have made this not a community meeting, and that might have been my mistake, but there's a meeting tomorrow to get some retrospective on people using KUDO. And it's within the company, and maybe that's why it's private, but I almost want to open it up to the public because oh, Tom, okay, Tom, you want in. Yeah, I'll see what I can do. I don't, in fact, I think I would much rather that be public. There's really no reason other than company initiatives. But I think if I'm struggling with, will we be tying the conversation too tightly to not be open if we make it public? I'll look into that. I'll get a read on people.
Yeah, if you can, I mean, people are using it. We like to get feedback on how people are using it and what the problems they're having. I understand that there's proprietary things you guys are working on and how you're using it.
Yeah.
So maybe it makes sense to have a next week, non-proprietary meeting for the community. If you guys can talk through tomorrow, what's proprietary about how we're using it so that we can kind of scrub that out of the conversation.
Or we put that on the agenda for the next community meeting.
Yeah, let's do that. I tell you what, Tom, to be very transparent about it, I don't think there's anything that we're doing that is company specific or proprietary relative to KUDO.
It's a great open source model, Ken. I really like how your company's doing that.
But I didn't want to constrain the conversation where somebody might slip or share something that they didn't intend to. So I think the meat of it, like what we're going to get out of it, would completely be shareable. And so I think my commitment at this point, at a minimum, is I'll take notes and make sure that those are publicly exposed. And
yeah, like Jan's proposal for doing it at the next community meeting and bringing those back up.
Exactly. I will say that what the precipice for this is we have regularly been getting on and off feedback from a couple of groups internal, and some of it was kind of education and learning experiences. Like they needed to kind of mature their understanding of Kubernetes and maybe even KUDO or operators. And what we were getting early on, I don't know if it's germane now or not. And so this was really an opportunity to go, hey, was it worth it? Was it worth doing KUDO? What value did it bring? I'm a little afraid because the reality is in some cases, they were getting something to installation, right? They were getting something into a production environment. And I think most of our value is associated with what I would refer to as day two, like pass install. It's not just Helm, it's something that's much bigger than that. So until you start thinking larger than that, you may not feel like you're getting the value that you were hoping, but that's what we want to learn.
Regarding that type of feedback, is there, in the release cycle, is there a plan for or requirements for what constitutes 1.0 and what that's going to look like?
Man, we should write that down. I'm writing that down now. Good question. That's a great question. I feel like there's a number of things still missing, and if go ahead.
Yeah, sure. One of my early complaints with Mesos was that it was really never 1.0 until it was 0.38 or something. And from a enterprise adoption, sometimes it can help management, people that aren't, on the ground, feel better about adopting a technology when you can say things like it's 1.4. Oh, great. Okay, good. We're in the 1 dots, not that that's a reason to necessarily release things, but
Yeah.
Well, 1.0 comes with certain promises, and that's what matters.
Absolutely, absolutely. And there's expectations there, and we should be ready to fulfill those. But if we want to stop being prototype and start being ready for production workloads and stability, day 2 ops like you had talked about, we should be working towards those and have a better understanding about what it means and what we expect and what our promises are going to be for those 1.0 release.
Like making GA operators, hint, hint, nudge, nudge.
I love this group. Yeah. I you know, to,
I was going
it
to say
wasn't.
all you need is courage. That's it, Marcin.
I feel an episode of Wizard of the Oz coming. Courage. Yeah, you know what wasn't clear to me is when you say V1, whether you mean like the semantic versioning is right now 0.14, and if you mean 1.0.0, or whether you mean kudo.dev/v1, and maybe they're in your mind the same. I'm not sure.
I think that would be we should probably align those, but my vision is that the stability that was mentioned would kind of align with, we're no longer in beta, we're in alpha, no longer in alpha, no longer in beta. We are ready for V1. The schema for operator versions and instances is kind of locked in. We understand what that looks like. Our promises on the operator side are V1 capable. We have plans in action for all those other things. I think those line lock and step, and we should talk about that as part of the roadmap.
Yeah, love it. I would add that in my opinion, but I'm one of many, I personally don't like having a V1 version that has dependencies that are less than V1 as well. So with that said, and I'm a little bit more loose on that for supportive libraries, I suppose. When we are solving the problem around CRDs and operators in general, I would think that we have to support V1 operators, or meaning CRD V1. And we don't yet, but.
So you don't like Istio being V1 because they use CRDs, which aren't V1 in Kubernetes? Or you can't have anything that uses CRDs be V1 because CRDs aren't V1? Is that your... Just to make sure I understand your statement, not to argue against
I get that it's debatable. Yeah, I get that it's debatable. Yeah.
If it's not about disliking that, but if they're happy to do the work, like provide stability on unstable ground, it's up to them.
Yeah,
there's our value add, right?
That's a good way of putting it. Like if you think about the different promises, so alpha is high rates of change and no promises, right? Beta is we intend for this to be stable, but there could be some issues, and we will work hard to make backward compatibility possible. And then V1 is we support it, and there aren't breaking changes unless we rev a version again. How can you possibly make V1 guarantees when the underlying, like the Kubernetes underlying infrastructure can't make those promises? That doesn't make sense.
I would say by abstracting that away, right? Kind of what KUDO does, and maybe even support multiple versions. But then it also depends on the maturity, or well, not maturity, but more like on the promises that these APIs make. They are kind of stable, at least some of the beta 1 things. And if there are backwards incompatible changes, they would have a V1 beta 2 or something. So we just need to kind of align with that, or take a deeper look at what are we using, and how do these components fit into what we want to have in mind, or would changes there break us? At least, that's my point of view there.
And I think CRDs are V1 as of 117, right?
Oh, they definitely are V1 as of, oh shoot, 116. I thought 116.
There it is.
Yeah. And worth pointing out, and this is the reason why it's a hot button for me. I did a little research a week or two ago. V1 Beta 1 for CRDs is deprecated and is expected to be revved out by I think Kubernetes 1.22, which is, my expectation would be it'd be December this year. If you look at the release cycles from the last 2 years, we get about 4 major releases out a year, and 122 would be this December.
Yeah.
That's not a guarantee. And frankly, it's not even a guarantee that it gets revved out. It's just, that's the promise, is up to that. I'll add a issue or a to-do at dependencies, I think, because I could easily see revving to V1 and being dependent upon like certs as alpha 3 or whatever it's at now. Like cert managers aren't making any guarantees right now. And we rely on them for the webhooks.
Right, and there is as Jan was saying, there's a place where we can provide abstraction to unstable APIs and account for that, kind of like Kubernetes does for nodes. Like that's the whole point, right? You can provide better reliability than your underlying infrastructure. And if we can do that from KUDO so that Cert Manager becomes part of that 1.0 support, again, that's good value. But I was just thinking about it when you said release cycles, and I was like, oh, speaking of releases.
Yeah, so typically so far, just to make sure it's being recorded and we have potentially new people here, we typically get a release out once a month, usually the first Friday of the month, somewhere in that time frame. That would be the cadence to expect. But yeah, I think there's a whole discussion here on when do we want to target V1 and, well, more importantly, what is required, which I think was your original question.
Yeah, I hate putting a timeline and then saying, all right, V1's in December, guys, let's go. All right, what are we doing? I don't know. What do we have time for?
And I mean, it gets bigger and bigger. We also had this, hey, how do we align to Kubernetes APIs? I created some PRs to bump the APIs or the client Go packages to 118, but we need to discuss how and when we bump, because I mean, related to that are also some API guarantees from the API we are using for Kubernetes. So that kind of restricts or constrains us on which versions of the cluster we can run. So, yeah.
Thanks for bringing that up. Actually, let's, if people are open to it, let's have a discussion around that. I'm actually thinking, so let's imagine we do have a KUDO V1 right now. Like, I can imagine the need for KUDO V1 against a Kubernetes 117 and one against a 122. And the underlying libraries for that version of KUDO could be slightly different. So do we imagine that we're going to have a need for multiple releases of KUDO versions that are based on probably client Go or?
Please not. I mean, yes.
Won't it be necessary?
I understand the why we would want to do that, but for me, it would be fine to just align to say, hey, we are using this Kubernetes APIs for this release of KUDO, so it's compatible with this and this clusters. Well, if somebody uses an older cluster, they need to use older versions of KUDO. And if we have some upgrade capabilities in KUDO, well, it's a when, not an if. So when we have that, then it's also possible to align the version of KUDO with our more or less stable APIs that we would have and be able to upgrade your Kubernetes as well as your KUDO.
But in that model, would that not mean that we have versions of KUDO that are tied to versions of Kubernetes? And wouldn't we need to backport to different, so then we have two different releases of different versions, whether you want to call them patch or minor releases, doesn't matter, that align with Kubernetes versions. That does seem like we have multiple releases concurrently.
Yeah, I mean, backports, and it depends on, yeah, if you're thinking of backporting like Kubernetes does for security stuff or something, and yeah, probably we would have to do that, yeah.
Okay. I don't think we have to solve it here. I think it's worth bringing up and having a conversation. And
Yeah, it's
saying, hey,
it also me thinking about what I just said, what this has and what that means in executing that, which means having multiple versions and backporting to older versions and all that stuff, which is of course a lot of work.
Yeah.
But I would say that's necessary.
Well, and part of that is going back to the original, start of this conversation. You put out a pull request for a bump to 118. It begs the question: when is that okay? When is that appropriate? When should we do that?
Yeah, exactly.
And what does it mean? What it means is, in all likelihood, you can go back to 117 and 116, but then you start to have potentially questions, right? Certainly not 114. There wouldn't be any guarantees it might work.
Probably does be from the APIs that we use, but
probably does.
Or probably not from it depends on what the operator does. That's the question. And how
part of the challenge is that I know for a fact that 115 had breaking changes intermittent in their releases for CRDs. So there are things that worked in the early versions of 115 that failed in the middle version of 115 that was questionable in the later parts of 115 around CRD specifically. So that knowledge starts to get lost pretty quickly when it's the tail end of the release cycle, or the support cycle, I should say.
I don't think we have to go back forever, though. I think 6 months seems reasonable. Support the previous 2 releases. I think that's kind of aligned with what Red Hat does for OpenShift. Like, that seems like a good pattern. The issue comes up when AWS is still running 114 and it's a year and a half old or whatever. Then you start to run into some people. Well, I'm trying to run it on EKS. Well, you're old, man. So you don't want to exclude people for that, but
and exactly. And then you have, I don't know, some big installation of something important. Not that we would care from the open source point of view, but from a company point of view, maybe we do, because this is a product that we are selling. And then it becomes important again to kind of support that, not from the open source community, but from us as the company.
I do feel that long-term enterprise companies will be more like the cloud companies that you just expressed, Tom. I think most organizations will not rev every 6 weeks their whole infrastructure. But that said, I'm totally with you. I think we can not align on that right now and deal with it as it comes up. But I think we need, So that begs the question, though. We do have a pull request out for 118. I have a hold on it, but it was only to have this conversation. Is there anything holding us from merging that?
Not from my side. I mean, I created the PR, but let's merge it after. Let's merge it after the release has been done, so that we can say the next release then uses the 118.
Well, again, I'm really just wanting to have a thought experiment here more than anything, and that is, I saw that I think 119 just released, or maybe it was 119.1. So why do we jump to 118 and 119, and when do we go to 119? I don't know the rules around when we decide to make this jump or not.
I would say stay N-1 until it's stable. I think 19 came out as alpha, right?
Yeah, I just checked the announcement channel and the Kubernetes Slack, and no, it's not. It's probably beta or alpha or something. Not released yet.
So I would probably lean
it is beta
towards
1. It's beta 1. Sorry.
Okay.
Yep.
I would probably lean towards staying at least 1 back, so that you have support, because the N plus or minus 1 guarantees for Kubernetes. If you're on 118, you can support 119 and 117, so you can be testing in the new environment with the previous. And then once things become stable and there's a new 20 out, you bump up to 19, and then that allows you to test in the current 17, 18, 19, or 18, 19, 20, and the new one. So you can be testing new versions of Kubernetes with support from the Kubernetes community.
So based on those rules, and again, I'm really just talking it through, right?
Yeah.
But based on those rules, we wouldn't merge 118 until 119 was out. And it's only in beta. So what do we mean by out? Does it mean released GA? If it's released GA, then under those rules, we wouldn't merge the 118 PR.
Right, we wouldn't merge it yet. I would also not do it during a release candidate, just to give it some more time to play out and test. But that's a separate issue. I don't know what you mean. I don't know what we should mean by out.
Yeah, but that sounds like a good approach. And I would say we also should document, I don't know, maybe in the release notes, what version of the API we are targeting here, we are using under the hood.
I totally agree with that. Absolutely.
And we should probably track that in KUDO logs as well. Hey, I was built for yada. You're running this. I don't no guarantees here. Yeah. It hasn't been tested for this type of situation, whatever we want to say there, but give the user some knowledge there about, hey, this might not work like you want.
Do you mean runtime discovery and then in the logs output of some information?
Yep. I mean, there's also a KUDO and Kubernetes version field inside the operators, which should also be tracked. I think those are there in reference, but never used. They were there as, we should do this at some point. It'd be great to have this info.
I think we have that now.
Great. Sorry.
Do we? I'm not 100% sure, but I think I added something there in the code, but it's a few months back.
Yeah. I know I was debugging something with someone the other day about a type of task that was being used that was not available in the KUDO version he was using, and it was unclear. Yeah. He didn't specify the KUDO version in his operator though. So it might've still been compliant within his spec, which was incorrect because he was using new things.
Yeah, that's possible. Yeah, good point. And it might have been the Kubernetes version that gets verified, not the KUDO version. I'm not 100% sure.
I took a couple notes. Probably want to, I don't know, maybe have some voting around that. I'm going to give people a few days to like marinate on this, and maybe we'll throw it up for some conversation or a vote or whatever. But I had a suggested bump to N-1 against latest GA. So if it's a 119 GA release, merge 118 into KUDO. Suggested that doc versions needed, and suggested to log runtime environment and expectations. Whether
it would also be good to track other products like maybe Rook, Istio, Strimzy, some of these production grade operators, and see what they're doing for their interactions, both in versioning and when they bump client Go or client Java, whatever they have particularly. And maybe even reach out to them and talk to them about how that's gone and get feedback on that.
Oh, it'd actually be great to get some feedback around experiences for operator developers and version bumping. Yeah. Love it. I kind of want to write a horror story book on on it.
On versioning or on Kubernetes versioning? Yeah.
Yes. Whole chapter on Kubernetes for sure. I feel like it should be a book though.
But yeah, I mean, it's a general topic, right? I mean, versioning is hard, especially if you have dependencies, and now you have, I mean, in cluster environments, you have dependencies on dependencies on dependencies, and all of them moving. I mean, it's microservices, right? Everything moves at their own pace and with their own constraints, and yeah.
Yeah, versioning is easy when you use nothing and nothing uses you.
Yeah. just put something on it.
Vacuums are
My
great.
super version A.
0.0.0.
Yeah.
Versioning's easy if you're home. When you when you install one version and that's all you do.
But even then, I don't know. I mean, yeah.
I'm sure they. No, I shouldn't make fun. I'm sure they have their own challenges around that as far as dependencies go in ways that we don't manage. So it's certainly easier when you don't pay any attention to upgrades. And
Yeah, that complicates stuff a lot.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Okay. Probably not needing to, well, the last meeting that we had, we talked about the namespace KEP. It's probably worth stating that not only did the KEP land, but it's been implemented and it's fully in place. So that's actually part of the current release. That kind of brings closure to that KEP. Any other topics to discuss?
I would like to spam that in 1 hour or two, like in next hour, we will release Cassandra new version that is supposed to be GA. So if somebody wants to test it and like give some kind of feedback or open any issues, that would be really helpful. I can promise some coffee or beer, like it's for every issue, but don't open too many issues. Like you can gather right, like issues there.
You don't need to test it, it's perfect.
Yeah, it works. It's just fine. We worked on that for a long time, so there can't be any bugs anymore.
It'd be an interesting thing, though. I think what I heard you say is you'd like to open up like a community test for Cassandra GA, yeah? And then collect.
No, I would like people to just use it, right? Like, and give some feedback. Like, so it has been just used by us from developers, and we have been testing for some customer-oriented use cases. That like we have like only one customer feedback that for who we were building that, like, and now it's going to be open source, and yeah, any kind of feedback, like we are just testing in the kind and like a specific distro of Kubernetes. I've not tested it like in the AKS or somewhere like that, or OpenShift or Wrench. I don't know, like if somebody wants to test that would be helpful.
Great.
Okay, I'm gonna be first. I have to go. Bye.
I had a thought and I lost it, so I guess I'll have to let it go. Something I wanted the community involvement with, but All right. Anything else? No topics. Okay. Our next meeting is currently scheduled for the 18th of June. That's 2 weeks from now. I will add to the agenda some of the suggested topics that we discussed here as a follow-up. And expect a KUDO 0140 release tomorrow in all likelihood, if not within a couple business days. Would love more testing and feedback on KUDO if you get a chance or opportunity for those that are out there using it. And that's it. I will close this meeting down and then make sure that this video is up on YouTube for other future viewers. All right. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, guys.
Be safe.